Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today's a solo episode, and I have a topic I want to dive into, and that's 5 reasons to have a phased nutrition approach. But first, before I go into that, I just want to go over a few ways you can help support the podcast. So first, if you have found this podcast to be helpful in any way, if you could leave a rating and review, and that will help more people find this podcast, more people will get this information. So if it's been beneficial to you in any way, please do that, and that will help the podcast grow and find more people. Again, I appreciate everybody who listens. Next, I have my free masterclass on body recomp, what it is, how to do it. And again, the link to that is in the show notes. Next, I have my free masterclass on nutrition periodization. I go over each nutrition phase, what it is, how to do it, what is nutrition periodization, which, spoiler alert, you're going to learn today. But yeah, the link to that is in the show notes. I will probably hit on this a couple more times, so this will not be the last time you hear about this today. There with that. And then lastly, if you haven't yet, give me a follow on Instagram, Jeff. That's where I'm most active on social media. If you have any questions, whether it be on the podcast, any questions in general, you can reach out to me on there. Or maybe I said something that you don't necessarily agree with, or you want a little bit more clarity, or again, my thoughts behind it. Again, you can just reach out to me there as well too. With that out of the way, let's dive into today's topic. 5 reasons to have a phased nutrition approach. I think with this, a big mistake I see people make is when they're trying to improve their body composition and health is just too much time focused on one goal. And what I mean by that is somebody has this goal of improving their look. They end up just being in this perpetual like fat loss phase. And if they're not fat loss dieting, then they're not on anything at all. They're not doing anything. And again, they're either 100% on where it's okay, I'm either all in on my nutrition or I'm not doing anything at all. And I'm just doing anything and everything. And I find that because of that, they don't phase their nutrition. It's always just fat loss. I'm on it. I'm getting back into fitness. I'm going to focus on my nutrition. I'm only going to make healthy food choices. I'm going to be in a calorie deficit. I'm going to lose weight. And then they do that and then they fall off or they reach their goal weight and then they don't have anything to focus on. And I find like those periods of time in between that are where people end up really spinning their wheels over the long run. It's just where you get caught in this no man's land where you feel like you have to always be fat loss dieting and you really don't ever build the body you want. And it's because of that period in between there. Again, we want a fat loss diet. I have clients fat loss diet all the time. It just becomes an issue when that's the only thing you ever do. And I also think it creates this like kind of poor relationship with diet, nutrition, and whatnot, because this always comes from this space of you need to restrict and you need to cut out because again, when we're trying to be in a calorie deficit, we do need to eat less than we typically would. But again, that's not something that we always need to do there with that. So again, I find that this is a big mistake people make. So for example, again, people just want to lean out, lose weight. So that becomes their only focus until they reach their end goal. When the reality is that you will likely need to do this in multiple phases, okay? Not only to reach your goal, but to make sure the results last. So that's the other kind of part of this too is, say somebody has X amount of weight to lose. They also try to go at it all at one time. And this is where you run into issues, right? Again, maybe the first 10 to 15 pounds come off super easy. You feel great. I can just do this forever. And then you get to that point to where now you're hungry, you're not feeling as great, your motivation's lower. And then that's when people inevitably just give up and they stop and then they come back and then they go back to losing that same 10 to 15 pounds. Same thing happens. And it's because they're trying to get it all at one time and they don't have anything to bridge them from that next phase there. So again, this kind of ties into what I said initially, but that's just a big mistake. And so this is where the concept of nutrition periodization, phasing your nutrition comes in. And this is why I'm a huge fan of doing this, right? So real quick, the 4 kind of common phases that I use with clients are a fat loss phase, a building phase, a recomp phase, and a health maintenance phase. And so if you want more information on these, what they are, this is where my free masterclass on nutrition periodization come in. So make sure you click the link to that in the show notes and let me know if you have any questions on that. But those are the 4 main phases. Like I said, most people spend their time in a fat loss phase or at least attempt the fat loss phase, and they never do these other 3 phases that are very important there with that. So let's talk about 5 reasons why we want to periodize our nutrition. First, the body adapts to the energy balance it is in. Unfortunately, the body is more resistant to weight loss than weight gain, but over time, the body will adapt to whatever energy balance you're in. Again, the body is going to be more resistant to your weight trending down, unfortunately. Anytime you do drop weight, you'll see hunger come up, you'll see energy levels plummet, you're going to be thinking about food more, your brain wants more food, everything's going to be geared towards you consuming more food, right? Getting back to energy balance. Biggest reason there for that is obviously in today's world, we have plenty of food around, but since this has only been a very short time that we've had this modern food environment, our brains and body are used to not having all this food around. And so our bodies are really good at have adapted to periods of time with low energy intake. And again, it's really this drive to eat more because your body and brain is like, okay, holy crap, we don't know when we're going to get our next food. We need to have energy to do everything that we need to do. We need to have energy to go get food. And obviously we need energy to make sure that our brain is functioning optimally, everything else in the body's functioning optimally. And so if that energy is not coming in, and you start to drop body fat, you have less energy around, your brain's going to be like, okay, we got to get some more food in. This is starting to be somewhat of an issue here. And that's where hunger kicks in, right? You start thinking about food more. Now, this is going to impact certain people more than others, right? Some people get this really bad. Your methods are also super important here as well, too. The more drastic you cut weight, the longer you do it, the leaner you get, again, maybe you're getting a lot of tasty calorie dense foods, the tougher this process is going to be and the more that this is going to hit you. And like I said, genetics are going to play a big role here. But this is why you first drop, but you lose some weight initially, pretty easy. Boom. After that, it gets very challenging towards the end, right? And so again, this comes down to things like energy levels decrease, hunger and cravings increase, libido decreases. That's another big sign there too. Again, libido decreasing to me shows that during this period of time, it's like, hey, you're not in an optimal state to reproduce. Like you need to focus on getting yourself some food first before you think about having children in the equation. So again, and this can make adherence challenging over time, and progress will slow down. So again, your body's going to adapt to that negative energy balance. Can be referred to as metabolic adaptation, whatever it may be. Again, I think that's less of an issue than people make it out to be. Adherence is the big thing, but you do have these drivers, these things that make it tougher to stick to a calorie deficit. And again, the body will adapt to that energy balance that it's in there with that. So by phasing our nutrition, you work with your body rather than against it. What do we do in this situation? How do we apply the phasing your nutrition here? Let's say you get to this point to where hunger's super high, you've already lost 10% or more of your body weight, energy is down, your motivation is low. This is where now we're going to slowly transition you to eating more calories. We do that, we get your body to be like, okay, cool. Now we can relax. We got plenty of energy coming in, and a lot of these things start to go away. And the goal is to obviously manage that period of time where, look, you're not going to be at your lowest weight, but you obviously maintain what you've lost. And then now you're in a much better spot mentally, physically, your body feels much more comfortable. And now you can restart that fat loss phase and go from there versus, let's say you're at 165, you drop down to 150, things start to slow down. Now maybe we maintain between 150 and 155. Now we start there and we start losing from there versus what do people typically do? They go from 165 to 150 or down to 145. They really push it. They just say, screw it. I'm not feeling great. They don't have any game plan. And then now they're back at 165 or 170. Now you got to start back over again, right? And this is where people get in that perpetual dieting. And people will sometimes say that phasing your nutrition is yo dieting or whatever, but it's really not, right? Because you're controlling it. That's not yo dieting. Whereas, yes, maybe there's a period of time where we do purposely try to gain weight, but it's in a controlled way versus an uncontrolled way. That's where you start to get to, that would be yo dieting from that perspective, right? Now, you can phase your nutrition and still do it in an unhealthy way. If you are somebody who drops a ton of weight and then you're like, oh, I'm in a building phase now, I can eat anything and everything, and then you just go balls to the wall with it. You have no structure. You gain weight super quick. Again, that is not great either, and you would need to work on that. So again, we would want to make sure that on the way up or outside of this is in a controlled way. So like I said, the body will adapt to the energy balance it's in. So I did mention the body is more resistant to weight loss and weight gain, but it will adapt to an energy surplus as well too. And again, this is where, and again, this is going to happen. This can happen in many different ways. For some people, their body will start to burn extra calories because it's like, we got a lot of calories coming in. We can be a little bit more wasteful. So these are your typical hard gainers, right? Like they have a hard time gaining weight. And again, you can thank genetics for that. So that's one way that the body will adapt upwards. It also will adapt upwards. And this is what you'll typically see happen with most of the general population, right? Is you'll see things like, for example, you'll become insulin resistant. Your body's, it's constantly getting hit with, you're constantly feeding it and it gets that insulin hit. So then it becomes resistant to that, right? It can also become leptin resistant as well too, right? So leptin's the hunger hormone. Leptin notices how much body fat you have on your body. And so when body fat levels get low, leptin will decrease. And that's when your body, again, you don't have that. It's your satiety hormone, right? So it's okay. We don't have as much. So we're not going to be as full. Whereas on the other end, more leptin you have, that will tell your body that you're full. If you're constantly feeding yourself, you have too much body fat, leptin, you can become leptin resistant to where it's, yeah, you have plenty of body fat, but now your brain doesn't understand that signal that it's getting from leptin, right? So same thing. And then this is where now you see all these issues from being overweight, right? Again, type 2 diabetes, all these other metabolic syndrome issues, higher cardiovascular risk, right? Higher levels of inflammation, gut issues, right? This is where you start to see things go downhill from the other end of the extreme, right? Whereas like on the way down, things like thyroid slow down, sex hormones may be thrown out of whack, which can still happen on the way up as well too when you get to these issues, but these are some other things that you see. And you just see things generally slow down. And that probably has to do with your thyroid and stuff like that on the way down. But again, your body will adapt to the energy balance you're in. Talked about how on the way down, we want to go to maintenance. But what about on the way up? Say you're somebody who's trying to gain some weight, you're in a building phase, and you do want to gain some weight for building muscle. At some point, you're going to have to get out of that surplus. You can't always be in that surplus because you're going to start to run into these issues. Now, if you do it in a controlled way, it's going to be much harder to get there, and it's going to take you a lot longer to get there. Whereas if you do it in an uncontrolled way, a lot of these adaptations on the way up are going to happen a lot quicker, right? And it's the same thing on the way down. If we have good methods from a fat loss perspective, again, we're eating enough protein, we're not going too quickly, we're getting good sleep, all these things, like it's going to be a much longer process, and it's going to be the impacts of the adaptations are going to be a lot lower if you're doing it in a controlled way and with good methods, right? So again, that goes both ways there. But like I said, you're going to see your body's going to be more resistant to weight loss than it is to weight gain, right? Again, some people, it's going to be really hard for them to gain weight, but that's a lot smaller the population. You're going to see the body really want to store body fat and be more comfortable with storing body fat. And again, we can see that in today's modern environment, right? With that. So let me know if you have any questions on that one. There's a lot to unpack there with that. All right. So number two, another reason we want to phase our nutrition is the building and maintenance of lean body mass. So first, when people want to improve their look, the biggest thing they overlook is building and maintaining their muscle. Again, yes, fat loss is going to help with your look, but people underestimate the impact of muscle as well. And so because of that, they don't do things that are going to help them maintain or build muscle in the process. I'll wait on that later, or they just never want to get to it because I don't want to look like a bodybuilder. But again, these are big mistakes. And one of the main things here with periodizing our nutrition is that it helps with the building and maintenance of lean body mass. Again, not only will muscle give you that better look at any given body weight, but it can also make fat loss and muscle and body weight maintenance much easier in this process, right? Again, so yeah, and by phasing our nutrition, the big thing here is that the longer we're in a deficit, the more weight we lose, the more extreme the deficit is, the leaner we get, we start to risk lean body mass loss, right? So this is where we want to make sure that we are prioritizing that on the way down, but then also by getting out of an energy deficit, we put our body in a better state to maintain our muscle and to build muscle when we're outside of a deficit. Again, yes, some people can build muscle in a deficit, but that's a short-term thing. That's not going to be forever. And eventually you will need to get to maintenance or a small surplus to build and maintain muscle. So again, it's super important that we have these periods of time where we eat more food, right? So it's important you fuel properly for building and maintaining muscle. And again, by periodizing our nutrition, it helps with this process. So let me take you back to an example of the person that, let's say their goal is they have a lot of weight to lose and they're like, I just need to lose weight. I'm not going to focus on building muscle or maintaining muscle. I'm not worried about that right now. Okay, that's fine. But then they try to really cut their weight super quick. So they go from say 250 down to they didn't weight train in the process. They got down super quick. It was pretty drastic. Now they're feeling super hungry. They're really food focused. They're not feeling great. It's like one, they didn't prioritize that muscle on the way down. So that, is some research to show that when you lose muscle, it may increase your hunger slightly until you regain that lost muscle, right? Losing muscle can impact your hunger on the way down. You also don't feel as great, right? And so those are two things there with that. So they lose a little bit of muscle on the way down. And then again, because they feel so crappy, they were super restrictive. It was really an intense protocol to get the weight down. Something comes up and they fall off the wagon, right? Now they're like, I don't want to do this. And then boom, now they gain all their weight back. When they gain that weight back, if they're not weight training in the process, unfortunately, that weight that comes back on is not going to be muscle. It's going to be body fat. So now it's like this person is close to the same weight, if not higher, and now they have less muscle, so they have more body fat. So their body fat percentage increases each time they do this. So we can see where, let's say in this example, we do it the other way. This is the person that decided, you know what, I'm going to do this the right way, even though I don't want to look like a bodybuilder. I'm still going to do this the right way. I'm going to make sure I focus on muscle. So you go at it at a little bit of a slower rate. Maybe you get down to 220, but you feel a lot better in the process. But hey, now you're starting to get a little hungry, but not to the point where you just want to completely go off. You know what? I'm going to take a couple months now to focus on eating a little bit more. That person, now they're at 220. During that period of time when they're eating a little bit more, they gain some lean body mass. They start to feel better. Now they're about 225, but they have more muscle, less body fat overall. And now they go from 225 down to 195. And again, they look completely different now with this 195 than they did when they tried to get down to 200 before. Now they have more muscle. And you can see where over time this starts to add up there with that. So again, periodizing your nutrition really helps with the building and maintenance of lean body mass. Number three, and this goes hand in hand with what I've talked about so far, but the weight rebound following fat loss and research on long-term weight maintenance. We know people can drop weight, but many people have trouble following that for an extended period of time. And for good reason, as this period of time is very challenging. This period of time after fat loss dieting, you've lost all that weight, you're going to have this drive to overeat, right? So it makes sense that they struggle to maintain that weight loss long term. So by periodizing our nutrition, this gives you a plan after your fat loss diet, and it gives you goals to hit during this time so you don't go off the rails. I think that's the big thing, is that it also gives you some goals to hit afterwards. But the big thing is we have that game plan after the fat loss phase. I've already talked extensively about not having a game plan and how that period of time afterwards, if you just wing it and just quote unquote fall off track, is really problematic long term there. So again, periodizing our nutrition gives us that game plan after the fat loss diet, which is crucial for every single person who wants to drop weight. Another reason is number 4, flexibility. Fat loss dieting requires fewer calories than normal. So we know that in order to get into a calorie deficit, we are, going to have to restrict calories compared to what we've been doing and what we would typically do. And so this can be challenging to adhere to long term. Again, we live in a world where, tasty food's all around. A lot of the stuff we do involves food. So it can be really challenging to maintain that caloric deficit for extended periods of time, and physically and mentally. I think mentally is the big one as well too, and just having that less flexibility is where people really get hurt. What really hurts them in the long run. So by periodizing our nutrition, this gives you periods of time when you can eat more food, which allows for more flexibility and balance. So again, because we're going to be eating more, again, this doesn't mean you're going to be stuffing your face with 4,000 plus calories every single day, but you are going to have a little bit more flexibility. Again, we're looking at maybe in a fat loss phase, you're at 1,800 calories. And maybe during our maintenance periods, we're at like 2,300 calories, right? 500 calories, that can make a difference mentally in terms of what you have to work with there with that. Number 5, everyone is different. So another benefit here is that not everyone needs to drop weight and not everyone needs to gain weight for building muscle. So by phasing our nutrition, it allows for individualization based on what the client needs. Because again, like I said, I think a lot of people come into it thinking, oh, they automatically need to just drop weight. That's the main thing. But it's maybe for you, you don't need to be in a calorie deficit. You need to be at maintenance or a small surplus to build muscle. But on the flip side, maybe not everybody needs to be in a building phase where they need to gain weight to build muscle. So again, this allows for some individualization, which is super important, right? I think where most social media content, most fitness and nutrition information goes wrong is that people take it without the context of what they're actually going through, right? So, this person says this diet's the best or this training's the best, but is that what you actually need? And again, I think this is where phasing your nutrition can be super helpful there with that. So I want to wrap up with a couple more benefits and then some potential cons, right? So these are like maybe less important benefits, but there's still some benefits. So first, it can be exciting and motivating to be switching things up from time to time. Again, you're not always focused on the same thing. So this is where maybe in research, you're not going to find anything that says periodizing your training or periodizing your nutrition is going to be better than just going at the same thing for extended period of time. But that's from like a physiological standpoint, right? From a mental and psychological standpoint, we get bored with things. And so by switching up our goals from time to time, it can keep us mentally engaged, mentally focused, and enjoying what we're doing, right? So therefore, adherence is better, which is if adherence is better, you're more likely to stick to it. You're actually going to see results versus if you're like, oh, I just always need a fat loss diet. Again, that could get boring after a while, and then you lose focus, and then now you just fall off because you're not switching up your goals, right? So that's a kind of really big overlooked benefit that, again, doesn't have anything to do with the physiological side of things. But again, we don't want to overlook that. And again, ultimately, what I'm trying to do with clients is, again, getting them uncomfortable and making sure that what we're doing is going to help them see results. But it's also what are they going to adhere to? And again, it's blending those two together and finding that happy medium there with that. I will say for some clients, they don't really care about that and they want to be 100%, hey, here's what's optimal. Again, I'm going to go over the pros and cons of that. But again, some clients want that. Some clients want 50-50, right? So it really just depends on the person. And again, we have to understand the potential trade-offs of that. Next, this gives a client a plan. You know where you're going rather than just blindly going about things. This has been something that's super helpful, is it gives a client a plan and they have an idea of where things are going versus, again, it's just like, oh, we're just losing weight. Again, how long does that go? Is there any end in sight here with that? So again, this gives a client a plan. And I think 3, it's better to be focused on one goal versus trying to do everything at once. So what I mean by that is by doing it this way, it's not, I'm trying to build muscle, I'm trying to lose fat, I'm trying to be healthier, I'm trying to do this. It gives you one thing to work on and you're able to go all in on that. Now, that doesn't mean we're completely neglecting other things, right? Because for example, let's say you did a fat loss phase and now it's time to maybe go to a building phase. We're not just going to say you can just gain as much weight as possible. We want to try to minimize fat gain as much as we can, but we're just going to prioritize the building muscle side of things more, right? So I think it gives you a plan and it gives you things to prioritize versus trying to do everything at once. I'm trying to be stronger. I'm trying to build more muscle. I'm trying to run faster. I'm trying to run a marathon. Also trying to lose body fat, but I also want to gain weight at the same time. Again, it takes away some of that because again, Just a big killer of results is just trying to do too many things at one time. I can't tell you how many times clients that don't see results, it's ones that are like 1 week they're doing this and then 2 weeks later they're doing this, but then they also want to do that. But then it's just, they're always trying to find new things to do. And that's a bigger issue there than anything else. So I've given you all the benefits, but I do want to say there are some potential cons here to doing this. First, it's not magic. You're still going to need to follow through. And if not, adjustments need to be made. Again, this isn't like oh, hey, you do this and you're automatically going to see results. Like you still need to follow through and actually do the thing. Because if you say you have a game plan of building and it's like, again, this is, we need to change it up. Something happened. All right, we need to be able to be flexible. Or if you're trying to lose body fat and it's not happening, again, just because you're in a fat loss phase, you're naming it a fat loss phase, it doesn't matter if you're not following through on what the actual things that you need to do for a fat loss phase. And if you're not, then you need to make an adjustment, whether that be, hey, this isn't a good time for a fat loss phase, or we need to improve our protocols. So for example, when I get a new client, we do baseline phase. So, okay, let's just get everything dialed in. They'll 9 times out of 10, they're seeing results in that phase because they're changing their habits. But then from there, I'll usually put them in a body recomp phase. And it just always so happens that 6 weeks later, when are we going to go to a fat loss phase? I'm like, look, you're technically in a fat loss phase right now. We're just naming it a body recomp phase. But if you can't stick to this right now, we have no business going to a fat loss phase, right? So like people will be like, they'll just, again, they want to hear that they're in a certain phase but it's like, ultimately it's what you actually do that's the most important, whether you name it that or not. So it's not magic. Like you still have to follow through and do the things that are going to elicit that particular goal. It can put some pressure on some clients. Having one specific goal to aim for can put some extra stress on certain people. So it's, hey, we're in a fat loss phase. Now they feel it's like pressure to stick to it. And sometimes that pressure can lead to them not being able to stick to it. So that is one downside. And lastly, you can't overly focus on sticking perfectly to periodization. Remember, this is just a blueprint. You have to be willing to make adjustments when you need to. So what I mean by that is, we said we were going to be in a fat loss phase. I have to follow through with this fat loss phase. I have to go through with it. But look, if it's not happening for you, things keep popping up. This just may not be a good time for a fat loss phase, and you have to be willing to be flexible with it and adjust if need be there with that. With that, that's everything on this. So hopefully you have a better idea of why you'd want to periodize your nutrition and why I'm a big fan of doing it and why it's super helpful for my clients. If you want to learn more about this, the nutrition periodization masterclass, which is free, is in the show notes. Again, I go over each nutrition phase. So it's, hey, now you know the benefits of it, but how do you actually apply it to yourself and how do you actually run each phase? Because like I said, you can say you're in a fat loss phase, but are you actually doing that in the most optimal way? And again, that masterclass has different videos for each phase, and you'll be able to set up the phase that you're in. And maybe you find that you actually need to be in a different phase, which the video should help you figure that out. Definitely download that, and the link to that is in the show notes. That is it from me for this episode. If you guys have any questions, you can always reach out on Instagram, but that's it for now. I will talk to you soon.